ஆரம்பிச்சனால We now have a blitz presentation contest. I invite Dr. Vijay Kumar Haribishta, Dr. Rajshekhar Bipeta to chair the session. Both of us will be joining us online. Dr. Rajshekhar Bipeta, Professor of Psychiatry, Deputy Superintendent, Institute of Mental Health, Osmania Medical College. Chairperson, Publication Committee, member of Research Capacity Building Committee, IPS South Zonal Branch. Dr. Vijay Kumar Haribishta, Consultant Psychiatrist in Padma Shri Diagnostics and Health Heal Home Healthcare South Bangalore. Previous at Hawk Faculty in NIMHANS Geriatric Psychiatry Unit. Assistant Editor, Guest Editor for the Telemedicine Supplement of IJPM. I welcome you both, sir. We now have Dr. Rajshekhar Bipeta. He's here online with us. Sir, shall we start the session?
Yeah, Dr. Vijay has joined.
Yes.
I can't see. I can't see Dr. Vijay.
Joined it, sir. Couldn't reach him.
Can you please wait for 1 minute? Let him join.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Have you contacted Dr. Vijay?
Sir, we couldn't reach him, sir.
Oh, okay. So what should we do? Should we start?
Yes, sir. You can start and introduce the topic, sir, and also give the instructions, sir.
Okay. I think it's better Dr. Vijay also can. Did you contact him?
So we couldn't reach him, sir.
Okay, 1 minute. Let me
He's
check.
on call.
Okay. So, should we start the program?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. This is a Blitz presentation, again a new concept like the previous session on video, film and all that. So there are few guidelines for this session. One is each participant, there are around 14 participants, they will be called in an order, and each participant has to present around 4 to 5 slides, and there won't be any, it's not a question answer session. So they have to present briefly. So the topic for this today's session is how to motivate a person with alcohol dependence syndrome into like getting into the system of like evaluation and further management. So with these brief remarks, I now request the first participant to come and start presenting. Thank you. Dr. Deepak, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Good afternoon,
please
sir.
go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for presenting me with this opportunity. I'll be making this presentation on the topic of motivating a person with alcohol dependence to get admitted to rehab. Just one second. Yeah. All of you must be familiar with a case of alcoholic liver disease and subsequent liver failure, who continues to drink despite being told by the doctors not to drink again and again. Various de-addiction centers as well as the rehab centers are full with patients who are unwilling to treatment and are coerced for treatment or are kept there without their will. Now it is interesting to understand what is this, why does this happen? Is this the so-called resistance of the patient? Do these people lack insight? Or are these people just fickle-minded and take decisions on a day-to-day basis and do not really stick with their decisions? I think it is appropriate to call all this phenomenon of not being able to stick with decisions or not being willing for the treatment as ambivalence. Now, Prochaska and DiClemente have given stages of motivation of change, and this clearly describes this ambivalence. With the first stage being pre-contemplation, in which there is denial of there being any problem. The second stage of ambivalence of contemplation, the person finally decides that there is some problem and determines that there is something needs to be done. A person can further take an action to change and maintain that action or go back to the previous behavior. Now, it is important to know that this motivation is a dynamic phenomenon, and it changes from day to day and can change within a day also, and it can change in both directions. A person need not continue their progress in the same direction, but a person who is in the preparation stage can go back to pre-contemplation or contemplation. And as therapists, it is our duty to change this motivation towards preparation and action and help people resolve their ambivalence. Now, when we are talking about ambivalence, how do we do it? Do we do it by force, or how else can we do it? So in the what of this motivation enhancement, it is important to first develop a connection and form a partnership with the patient, a working relationship, or what we term as therapeutic alliance with the person, so that we can help them change. The next stage would be, in this partnership or alliance, to develop and maintain a particular direction towards change and continue with a plan to change. It is also important to elicit a person's motivation, elicit statements from him which tell about client's own feelings or their own thoughts about why do they need to change, and evoke these responses. Finally, planning how it can be done, the behavioral change can be done. At the same time, formulating an action plan is also very important. It is definitely important to understand and remember that this is a collaboration and not confrontation. Here, the client as well as therapist are partners in their whole journey, and the journey is not imposed on the person. It is also important that the direction or the action plan is not imposed, but however it is evoked. It is important to evoke because this represents the patient's own feelings, their own thoughts about why do they need to change, and these are the thoughts and feelings that are sustainable, and these are the action goals that can be sustained over a long period. Finally, the autonomy, I cannot emphasize it enough that the power lies within the patient to change. And we do not come as authority figures here. We do not say that this is how you should do it, but all the answers come from the patient within, and this continues throughout the process. How can it be done? Multiple skills can be used during this. Using open-ended questions, not limiting the patient's answers to yes or no or very short answers is very important, because this would give us an opportunity to dig deep into their own motivations and their own commitments to change. Giving frequent affirmations about their own strengths, as well as every step of the way, if they are doing something positive, to reinforce that positive direction is very important. This can be done at every positive step that they take, even at the first visit when they come to you, even if if they are unwilling. Just the fact that they have understood that somebody is willing to take me somewhere and they are ready for treatment is important. Reflective listening probably is the most important skill when we are talking about motivational interviewing. Reflective listening not only makes the person understand that you are listening to them, that you are there for them, but at the same time, it can also help the patient in understanding what they just thought or what they just said to the therapist. Finally, summarizing either in part or in a whole is also very important. This not only tells the patient that you have listened to them completely, but at the same time, it also can sometimes help change the direction towards a particular direction that the patient wants to take. In the end, in the whole, all of these skills as well as these techniques are focused towards eliciting change talk, which forms the basis of motivating the person. This change talk is a person's desire to change. Statements like "I want to change," statements like "this is the reason for me to change," statements that show the person's ability to change are very important, because these are the change statements that will help us continue that journey. And also the need to change, their own reasons why do they want to change, is something that you need to do. This can be again done in various ways by developing a discrepancy in their own minds about what is happening. At the same time, supporting their self-efficacy by giving the authority to them. In the end, I would like to finish with take-home points that one must remember that motivation is dynamic. It can change from day to day, within a day, or from minute to minute. It is important throughout the process to make sure that this process upholds the person's autonomy. It evokes the person's thoughts and feelings, and at the same time, it's a collaborative effect. Our aim at the end of it is to help the client in resolution of their ambivalence and continue to get treatment, maybe in the form of getting admitted to a rehab center. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deepak, for that brief presentation. Now I request the next participant to go ahead.
Dr. Kushbu Divani.
Good morning. I am Dr. Kushbu Divani from Bangalore. I'm a practicing psychiatrist at Spandana Healthcare. Today we are talking about how to motivate a person with alcohol dependence for rehab care. Motivation is the fundamental to change. Any kind of motivation intervention requires us to assess first where the patient is in terms of readiness to change. 80% of patients that we see in our OPDs generally belong to the pre-contemplation stage. That is, they have still not decided that they want to change, or they are unwilling to see the effects of alcohol, or the contemplation stage, that is, they're thinking about reducing or stopping the alcohol use. The patients needs to be assessed for their willingness to change, readiness to change, and their ability to change. Identifying statements like, I want to, I would like to, I will, I can, and I could is very important while assessing the individuals for change. Motivational interviewing is one of the most common methods that is used to elicit optimism for change and the patient's belief in their ability to change. We need to start a motivational dialogue, and to address the ambivalence of the patient, we need to work in partnership with these patients to find out how the patient believes that they can or want to achieve abstinence and maintain it. It is very important to give autonomy to the patient and encourage their own reasons to change. Open-ended questions help in identifying them to tell their own story in their own words. Certain questions like, why do you think there is a need to change? What is it about the current scenario that you need to change help in identifying changes? Affirmative statements like, I'm very happy that you're willing to change. I'm very happy that you met me today are very encouraging as well as give confidence to the patient to change. Reflective listening is very important while talking to these patients about change. For example, if a patient says that he has my hand shakes in the morning, so a reflective listening would be, so it must be very disturbing. Why do you think your hands shake? Do you think the handshake is because of alcohol? This kind of ambivalence that is created in the patient's mind helps in identifying whether the patient wants to change. The most important point after identifying the change is to summarize so that the patient is also sure that the doctor has understood where the patient is in terms of motivation, and the patient also understands where he wants to be in terms of treatment. When we identify that there is a change talk, that is, a patient is talking about a change, the patient is talking about that, yes, I want to leave alcohol, we have to encourage commitment. Reviewing any kind of past successes that the patient has made in terms of leaving alcohol or rehab care in the past, identifying their strengths and affirming their strengths, asking, why would you want to stop alcohol? How serious does this feel to you? The key is to ask fewer questions and to offer reflective listening. Emphasize on autonomy and provide information regarding the array of options that are available. Not only rehab care, but also to ensure that they come for constant follow-ups. Once the patient has the motivation to change, the next step is to strengthen this commitment. The strengthening of commitment can happen by creating doubts regarding risk of use, relevance of leaving alcohol, importance of leaving alcohol in their life, probable challenges that they're going to face while leaving alcohol, and repeating why the change is necessary for them. Any discord that is met at this stage in terms of patient becoming aggressive, patient becoming very defensive, that he does not want to leave alcohol, may be met with apologizing, affirming, as well as shifting the topic or the focus of topic, that is from a longer care to a shorter care, at least for a current situation, for a current brief period of time, whether the patient is willing to change. You should
Dr.
be
Khushbu.
avoiding any kind of argumentations.
Dr. Khushbu, 2 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Avoid any criticism while listening to the patient choices and giving them the autonomy to choose. The whole purpose here is to point them towards a change, that is asking for a commitment. Ask them, are you going to do it? Is this what you intend to do? Evoke an activation talk like, how ready are you to do it? Are you willing to give this a try? Once the person is ready to do it, set a date. Set a date about when do you want to do it? When do you think you'll be able to go for it? When do you think you'll be able to seek help? And once they're ready for it, prepare them. Prepare them in terms of what is the first step that they want to take? What is that they really need to go to? Who they want to include in this whole treatment plan? MHCA also provides the autonomy to the patients. MHCA also gives the option of insurance coverage while giving rehab care. So these are the points which can help them to encourage or take rehab care while deciding for the long-term care that the patient is. As a conclusion, I would like to share a short expert where I would like to tell that we had a 35-year-old patient who came to the OPD with 20 years of alcohol abuse. Now the patient has IPR issues with the wife and is missing work. The first thing the examiner or the doctor asked the patient was his willingness to change. The patient says, I do not really want to stop alcohol use, but I want to decrease the use. So when the patient gives such a statement, do not become defensive. Understand, accept that yes, there must be a problem. That is why you're thinking that there is a need to change. So how can you identify or what is the situation that led this change to happen?
Dr.
Why
Khushbu,
do you think you need
Dr.
to?
Khushbu, yeah,
Yes,
please wind off within a second.
Why do you think you need to stop? Identify the reason for stopping and encourage any kind of previous attempts that have been made and any kind of positive statements given by the patient. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Khushbu. Now I request the next yeah, let me please tell, there are only 5 minutes for each presentation. We have around 14 presentations. So now I request Dr. Akshata to take over.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I thought it was 6 minutes, no, sir? That
No,
was what
5.
was given in the
It's 5 minutes.
next
Okay.
slides and 6 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So we've always spoken about the medical aspects of alcohol. So since it's a creative,
Yeah.
since it's a creative presentation, I would like to talk about the
Okay, sure.
culture and religion of
So the
alcohol.
timer you have displayed, no? Can it go on?
Sir, timer is displayed here, sir.
Hello. Hello.
You can start now, ma'am.
Yeah, Rajshekhar timer is displayed. Now we have gone back to 5 again. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. So, like I was saying, we have always spoken about the medical aspects of alcohol. So, since it's a creative presentation, I want to focus on the religion and culture of alcohol today. Apparently, recently there was a huge ruckus in the Rajya Sabha over the alleged association of alcohol with Hindu deities. So before I begin, I would like to say a disclaimer that I am not an atheist and I absolutely believe in the hundreds and thousands of gods that we have. And I do not mean any, intent to any religion or culture whatsoever. So to start off with the Hindu mythology, among all our numerous gods, the one I've picked today is Lord Indra. So Lord Indra was one of the most strongest and important gods at one point in time. He was the god of war, the wielder of the thunderbolt, and according to the Rig Vedas, he is the god for whom the most number of Vedic hymns were dedicated to. But today, do you see any festivals for Lord Indra? Do you see idols of Indra being worshipped in our puja rooms? No. And you want to know why? The answer is alcohol. Rowdy and adulterous, he is later described in the post-Vedic passages as a hedonistic, intoxicated god and also a dipsomaniac. So when this alcohol, when when the Lord of Indra could not survive on alcohol, do you think you, being a mortal, can survive on the cheap sura that you are procuring from the neighborhood bar? Something to think about, right? So coming to the Islamic wars, apparently, way before Prophet Muhammad, Muslims still continue to consume alcohol. It's also mentioned in the Sunni hadiths that a lot of Muslim warriors were slain during the Uhud war with wine in their stomach. And this is a quote mentioned there. So apparently after this, that's when the Islam started prohibiting wine and any alcoholic beverages. And after this, the Islamic warriors hit a jackpot because many scholars and writers suggest the fact that Muslim warriors were sober while their enemies were possibly drunk was one of the most important reasons for Muslim regions being established, even though they were outnumbered in so many wars. So basically, when alcohol can lose battles, you might ask me, what battle are we fighting in this 21st century? Because life is good right now, right? But after all, I just want to say, you're going to lose the battle of life, aren't you? Moving on to the Norse mythology, apparently there was this person called Aegon who brew alcohol for the gods. So in one of these sessions, he hosted a big party where all the gods and goddesses were invited. In one of these parties, one of the gods, Loki, got so intoxicated that he started, having a fight with the gods, abusing them, questioning their fidelity, basically all those classical disinhibited behavior that we see so commonly associated with alcohol. So all the goddesses and gods were obviously pissed. So one of the gods, by the name of Sikil, got so irritated that she caught hold of Loki and tied him to a rock and suspended this venomous snake above him. Now, he is paying for his sins, but like we see with alcohol patients, his wife was so disturbed by it that she decided to hold a cup collecting all this venom, such that it doesn't hurt her husband. So imagine holding a cup for the rest of your life. Obviously, once in a while, it is supposed to spill over. So sometimes it did spill over Loki. And it was so painful that during that time, Loki was supposed to be writhing in pain. And legend has it that during this time is what causes earthquakes even today. So now we all know who's to blame for those terrible, terrible earthquakes, don't we? Alcohol. So moving on from religions to cultures and beyond. So I think some of you would have heard about Vikings. So they were these big, burly, bearded beasts who, rode on boats to innocent villagers, pillaging and plundering all these coastal areas. And trust me, they were apparently the most ferocious warrior clan to ever exist. So one of their most important gods, Odin, infamously suggested people against drinking
Dr.
alcohol and
Akshata,
intoxication.
2 more minutes, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So basically what happened is they did not listen to their gods, and guess what happened? They're extinct now. They don't even exist. So basically, to summarize, my dear mortal friend, when gods, emperors, and kings couldn't survive alcohol, do you think you, a mere mortal, can survive it? I don't mean to be condescending, but in case if you ever require help, please remember you can only ask for it, and the rehab center is always here to help you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Akshata, for that brief presentation. Now I request the fourth participant to go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Jayashree Muniraj.
Yeah, 5 minutes. That's fine. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, Doctor. Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Yeah. Okay, just one. I already messaged. I'll just tell them again. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
If see, each participant is given only 5 minutes, and if you exceed 5 minutes, there will be negative marking.
Okay.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Please. Yeah.
Respected judges and my dear colleagues, very good afternoon to one and all. I'm Dr. Jayashree, second year psychiatry PG, KAPV Government Medical College, Trichy. I'm going to take my patient as Mr. X and I'm going to motivate him. Hello, Mr. X. I'm here to help you to get rid of your alcohol drinking habit. After eliciting your history, I found that you started your alcohol habit as a fun thing along with your friends and continued for social reasons. Now you are said to be drinking daily to relax yourself and to distance yourself from various stresses of life. But the actual thing is, alcohol is not a solution. It is your actual problem. Though it is difficult to accept, let me explain why it is important to quit alcohol in your life. It's time to accept the reality how you deranged from a perfect professional, responsible person to a place where you lost your control over your actions, lost your job, troubled your family members with your unacceptable behavior, and facing financial problems and monetary losses. Apart from all this, alcohol started to affect your health. Your investigation report states that your liver, stomach is already on damage, and its complications are visible. You also had a previous episode of pancreatic problem. I remember our conversation during that time also. But you have been confident and assured to quit your alcohol by your own. It's so mistakes on your path of recovery as long as you learn from it. Yes, Mr. X can understand how much efforts you are taking from your side to quit your alcohol habit. Even if you fall off track and regret your mistake, it doesn't mean your journey is over. Still, addiction-free life is possible and worth it. We are always there by your side, and we need your mindful cooperation so that we can make your life fruitful again. Like previous time, you may tell that, doctor, I can stop my alcohol by my own. But the actual thing is, during the period of cessation of alcohol by your own, you will develop symptoms like tremorlessness, palpitations, fear, psychological symptoms like suicidal ideation, suspicious ideas, hearing voices, etc. To mitigate the symptoms, we will help you with medications, psychological counseling, and supportive care. In an inpatient setup to make you fit physically and mentally. We have a government also provided us with separate de-addiction wards with a team of doctor, clinical psychologists, supportive care, etc. Where a garden to relax and with recreational activities. Here we will provide you with group therapy where people affected by alcohol will constantly motivate you from relaxing again, and family therapy for family members where so that you won't face any hindrance from any side during this process of recovery from alcohol habit. Mr. X, I hope you understood the importance of alcohol de-addiction. At this point, I also want to add a note to your family members. You as a caregiver, you did a great job. You did a great job. Don't lose hopes. At this point, your role is so crucial to give the energy and motivation to help him to get rid of this habit. Stay calm and composed. Provide him with nutritious food during this period. Even if he tensed up, try to soothe him or at least avoid negative conversations. Allow him to take sufficient rest. Constantly engage him in family activities. Don't leave him alone. Apart from all this, continued motivation is so important, Mr. X.
One more minute.
Okay, sir. Whenever you feel very difficulty in adjusting to the new environment without the presence of alcohol, kindly contact our mental health team. You can also stay in touch with groups like Alcoholic Anonymous, where people affected by alcohol will constantly motivate you from relapsing again. Self-motivation is the best motivation, Mr. X. Keep short-term goals like one day at a time, and I'm postponing today so that it won't be very difficult for your mind to accept the reality of quitting your alcohol for your lifetime. If you can quit for a day, you can quit for your lifetime. All the best, Mr. X. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you, Jayashree.
Yes,
on time. Now request the next participant to go ahead.
Dr. Puraliyaptam Shivraj Sharma.
Yeah, Shivraj, please go ahead. I'll give one alarm at 3rd minute and again at 1 minute. Means 2 minutes and 1 minute. Please go ahead, Dr. Shivraj.
Dr. Shivraj, you can start.
Yeah, I'm having some issues, so just give me a minute.
You can enlarge the screen, Dr. Shivraj.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it is visible.
Yeah,
Please
it's
go
visible.
ahead. No issues. Please go ahead. It's visible.
Okay. A very good morning. I'm Dr. Puraliyaptam Shivraj Sharma. I'm a third-year resident in ND Psychiatry from NIMHANS, Bangalore. I would like to start my presentation with this very quote by Diana Jennings, which says, "Addiction is the only reason where the locks are on the inside." And I felt that this is very pertinent to today's topic also. For better understanding, I'll be dissecting today's topic into three major components, starting with motivating a person. Because motivation is the driving force which leads to persistent behavioral change towards a goal. And it's a very internal process again. The goal here is to come out from alcohol dependence, which is a chronic relapsing condition, and to finally get him admitted into a rehab. So in simple words, to rehabilitate is to help someone live back to a normal life and integrate with society again. On a personal note, when I was preparing for my PG entrance, one of my teacher narrated an incident where an elderly gentleman who's a chronic smoker has been diagnosed with cancer of the throat, and he was operated in a tracheostomy tube was placed in the throat. And when this gentleman came to the OPD for follow-up, he was smoking from the tracheostomy valve itself. That time it was a joke and everyone was laughing. But when I got into psychiatry, I started thinking why this particular person is behaving in such a manner. So some of the things which it goes the same way for alcohol dependence also. Is it because of lack of knowledge or insight about the gravity of the situation? Or is it about craving which is not completely properly managed? Or is the person having an underlying depression because he's suffering from cancer and he says like, what's the point of doing all these things? Or is he going through some significant life stresses of which this is a coping mechanism? Because it is very important to answer some of these questions because it's like finding the key to the lock where they can start opening their own prisons. Coming to why we should intervene and who are we to intervene, I'm going to quote this book by David Sheff, which says, many addicts are alive because their families did not want them to hit the rock bottom. And for many of them, there is no bottom, it's a bottomless pit. Alcohol dependence is a major public health crisis. Currently, about 16 crore population in India are currently affected. But the most important thing here is to let them understand that addiction is not a moral failure. It's not a behavioral problem, but it's an illness which can be treated properly. So what can we do as mental health professionals? We can be facilitators of change or mediators of change by helping guide the patient move through the different stages of the motivation cycle which has been laid down. Taking into the perspective of motivational interviewing, which was started by Milner and Dolnick. So when Dr. Milner started with his research on alcohol abuse, he found out that the most important measurement of outcome in this group of population is empathy. So empathy is the major point where there was a
Shivraj, 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
There was a paradigm shift from the routine way of trying to confront, trying to give them direction and trying to correct alcohol abuse towards a more empathetic, respectful and autonomous process. So to summarize, it is a collaboration, it's an equal participation, not a confrontation. The person has autonomy over himself to make his own decision and being self-reliant, and the whole process has to be evoked. It is not to be imposed through reflective listening and trying to make the person understand what is the role of alcohol in his life and what can be done. Here, I would also like to mention that they need to also understand the biological process, which can be defined in simple journey of impulsivity to compulsivity, like addiction is when you can stop, you don't want to stop, and when you want to stop, you cannot stop. That as simple as describing addiction in a manner. So to conclude with, after doing all this, will this person get finally admitted to the rehab? There's a high possibility, but there's no surety. But addiction is an adaptation. It is not the person, it is the cage that the person is living in. And motivation is the key to this behavioral change. And if we utilize motivational interviewing correctly, we can help them open their own locks of the prison and lead them towards better lives. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Shivraj. Yeah. Next presenter, please.
Dr. Uma Maheshwari. Sir, Dr. Uma Maheshwari hasn't joined us. Let's go to the next.
Okay, next person.
Dr.
Yeah, next
Rini
person
Maurya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me 1 minute. My slides are visible.
Please be ready with your presentations on your laptop. Please open that. Otherwise, you lose the marks. Yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Rini Maurya. I'm from Sri Siddhartha Medical College. As we all know, change is scary for most of us, and it can be incredibly easy to come up with reasons why we shouldn't do something, even if it can change our life for the better. Due to the consumption of alcohol in heavy amount, people started acting irresponsibly and dangerously. Thus, they had started calling alcohol as devil juice, which means body-eating spirit. As we know that alcohol has many adverse effects on body, including CNS, involvement of CNS, which causes lack of concentration, memory loss, depression, gait difficulties, increased cancer risk in oral cavity, larynx and throat, affecting cardiovascular system by causing hypertension, arrhythmias, heart failure, cardiomyopathy. In hepatobiliary system, it causes fatty liver cirrhosis, cancer. In genitourinary system, it causes impotence, erectile dysfunction, and GI symptoms, mainly pancreatitis, gastritis, no appetite, and even cancer. So all these side effects, major side effects alcohol has. Affecting liver. When we start drinking alcohol, healthy liver can become fatty liver, and it leads to cirrhosis. Ultimately, there will be no any option other than liver transplant. I'm going to explain through a story, which I think we all know, about a ferocious lion with a thorn stuck on his paw. The lion was having immense pain that he thrashed around and scared others away. He was not able to remove the thorn on its own, and whoever comes near to him, he would lash them out. He was in complete agony, an agony which could have been easily removed if he would let others help him out. Here in this story, the lion is the person who has addiction. The thorn is the alcohol, and pain it caused was a negative impact on life. Man helping was doctor, and the removing thorn was the rehab center. So ultimately, the rehab center has. If you thought that about seeking treatment, you have already taken a critical first step by acknowledging that you may need help to overcome addiction, and this help can be given by rehab. Rehab has many amenities and holistic services and recreational activities like yoga, exercises, kayaking, indoor activities like carom board playing, chess, swimming pool. These are all the recreational activity. The rationale behind these activities in the rehab center is to engage the patient more into the physical activities to enhance successful recovery. According to National Institute,
2 more minutes.
90 days of golden standard is for treatment, which leads to change in their old behavior, learn new habits, gain deeper understanding of recovery, learn new coping skills, and the doctors and the social workers in rehab center will help you to overcome addiction difficulties with medications. With medication, there will be therapies and counseling session which will help you to understand and to give you more coping skills. There will be the break in the chain, which is clean. You need a clean, sober area, sober place for quitting alcohol, engaging, giving emotional support or early support, which was given in the rehab center, where you can interact with other people, get to know their own stories, how they are recovering, how they are facing the problems in the recovery phase, and how they are overcoming those problems. These all problems will be helpful in
1 more minute, please.
Coming out of this addiction. Doctors and social workers in the rehab, they can only help you with the with medications, therapies, and all. But it's the person who has the will and determination to come out of this addiction is depend on the internal will and determination of the person. Thank you.
Thank you, Rini. Yeah. Next presenter, please.
Dr. Usha Nandini.
Am I audible?
Please, yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I promise to keep up with the time, and since it's a non-academic presentation, I thought about explaining what Blitz is. It's an abbreviation of the word Blitzkrieg, a German word for lightning. It came into English vocabulary when the German troops made a sudden overwhelming attack over the English territory during the World War II. And the English, being English, even though they suffered a massive loss, took the word and kept it for themselves. And here we are to make a lightning attack on you, for the good or worse. So this is a topic given, and the two words, motivating and alcohol dependence, struck me as ironic because alcohol dependence, once established, becomes an important, if not the only motivator in the particular client's life. Hence, the title becomes ironic in the sense that motivating an alcohol-dependent individual for rehabilitation is like making his own brain fight against himself, and it's kind of like an approach avoidance conflict, right? It's like a car driven in a particular direction, and we are trying to push it into a desired direction, which is exactly the opposite of the existing direction. Sounds extremely difficult, right? That's what we are trying to do while we are motivating a person with alcohol dependence. And we might first have to get them into a neutral position, that is accepting alcohol as a problem, and then drive them towards rehabilitation. Another issue is that not all patients drive at the same speed. Some may be in the first year, some may be in the fifth year, some might even shift gears during the course of time, and you know how dependence works, right? Now, we all agree with the theories of addiction. But the question is now, how to motivate this person with alcohol dependence to get better? It is not a completely unanswered question, and we use a lot of scientific principles which was explained by speakers before me, and they had explained it very well about the motivation enhancement therapy, about Miller and Rolnick's theory, about Prochaska-DiClemente's model of the stages of change and whatnot. It's all great. But if you think about it, with all our motivation enhancement techniques, what are we actually doing? We are asking the patient to invest his time into rehabilitation and betterment for a better life, right? How is it any different from selling a product to someone? They will have a list of why they can or can't or don't want to do that, and we need to be able to convince them with a list of why they should do that. It is not very different from selling a product. That is how advertisements work, right? So we are psychologically manipulated into buying something or doing something that we might not even want to do. That is the whole point of marketing strategies. They use a lot of psychological principles. Why can't we borrow it back and use it for our own benefit? After all, it is our concepts, right? The only difference would be there the seller benefits from selling the product to a customer, and here we are selling a better future for the patient's own benefit. So I was looking into a lot of marketing strategies, and this seemed to be striking. The 7 P's of the marketing mix. It's all part of MBA syllabus, okay? There was a lot of psychological principles used by them: scarcity theory, reciprocity principle, laws of marketing, etc.
2 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Believe it or not, they use psychology more than us. Probably because they earn more money from it, not sure. Maybe we might get clever enough to use some of their principles with us. Anyway, coming back to this, how to apply this? Honestly, not everything is applicable, but I did manage to come up with some answers. The product we are selling is a better life, a better quality of life or a future for the patient. The price we are asking them to pay is a small amount of his time, money, and most importantly, we are asking him to give up the pleasures of alcohol. Talk about his place in life right now and how it could be, talk about other like-minded people he could meet, explain the whole process, give him live examples of how patients with alcohol dependence improved after rehabilitation. Don't be shy to use projection graphs like how a startup asks for funding to venture capitalists. Show them the graph of how their life is right now and how it will be in 5 years with or without making an effort. So this is what I have projected as my concept of this Blitz presentation, understanding the irony of motivation and marketing principles to use it to our advantage. It is actually nothing new. It's like presenting an old wine in a new bottle. I even have evidence of how Miller had given sales examples in his own publication of motivation enhancement therapy. Now that I have projected a supposedly novel idea and pulled my own leg, we can officially declare this lightning attack to be over. Thank you for listening to me whine.
Your name, please? Your name?
I am Usha Nandini, sir.
Usha. Okay. Usha, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next presenter, please.
Dr. Saida Najwa.
Yeah, please go ahead. You will be losing marks if you don't start immediately. Please start immediately.
Good afternoon. The change we can believe in. I would like to begin by recalling a person who always loses control, leaves bother about himself or others, looked down by others, loses self-respect, admitted several times in casualty, getting into legal issues, burdens of family members, and in spite of knowing and done all the hazards, fails to correct himself, all due to one word, addiction. Did you know that the alcohol consumption in India ranges from about 16 to 60%, varying from places to places, contributing nearly 17.1% of psychiatric emergencies in Indian hospitals. It is disheartening to reveal that 20% of domestic violence is due to alcohol consumption, and the risk of suicide is 25 times higher among ADS. Believe it or not, 20% of fatal RTAs in India is due to alcohol consumption. When we talk about the term addiction or alcohol dependence, it is too sad that many individuals consider it to be just a behavioral change, and it's a matter of choice to hold on to it or to quit it. As psychiatrists, we feel it's a vicious cycle that is causing a significant change in the brain system. Diagnostic guidelines such as ICD-10 and DSM-5 clearly gives us criteria to diagnose ADS, providing that it's not just any other habit, rather a psychiatric disorder. Many still live by the thought that they can control the desire and craving just by their willpower. However, study states that interactions between the cognitive biases and impaired executive functions and abnormal affective processing in ADS results in weakened willpower. Before we proceed further, I would like to break the common myth that alcohol helps for sleeplessness and body ache. But the truth is, alcohol is a CNS depressant and long-term can use to alter the circadian rhythm, which will control your sleep-wake cycle and makes the problem even worse. Similarly, under intoxication, one becomes unaware of the pain sensation, mistakenly interpreting as a cure for body aches. However, on the long run, myopathy is a common encounter complication. Many of you think that alcohol consumption can be controlled by self, but as experts in de-addiction, we feel that it may not be possible because your physical body may not cooperate as well as you think. One may experience a wide range of withdrawal effects, ranging from a simple complicated withdrawal to an uncomplicated withdrawal. Hence, quitting alcohol always needs an expert opinion. Similar to diabetes and hypertension, definitely ADS is a chronic disease, and if I diagnose you with diabetes or hypertension, I would be prescribing you medications along with lifestyle modifications. Similarly, in ADS, we advise avoid visiting places where they used to have alcohol and meeting friends with whom they used to drink, and try to be occupied with work and have a good drug complaints and regular follow to the psychiatrist. Coming back to the person who I quoted earlier in my presentation, those who get admitted willfully and his life turns back into a happy, harmonious routine. He gets back his family, friends, money, and whatnot.
2 more minutes.
But guess what? Once again, a single strike. Why not try it again for one last time? Approximately 40 to 60% of addicts relapse. Relapse prevention is an important aspect and to maintain abstinence. With our experience as specialists, we feel that patients on psychotropics of ADS shows a lower rate of relapse than those who were off medications. Alcohol demolishes both physical and mental health of individuals. Studies reveals that alcohol consumption can increase the risk of following disease by multiple folds, such as gastric ulcers and liver disease, Korsakoff's, cerebral degenerations, and alcoholic myopathy. And it may also lead to various psychiatric disorders such as alcohol-induced psychosis, mood disorders, and anxiety disorders. We have best medications and psychosocial strategies to treat and prevent you from all symptoms and problems. To conclude, I would like to enlighten about the current scenario of de-addiction centers. Many of you have heard about different rehab stories where patients are treated like slaves and de-addiction centers are looked up like jails. I can assure you that after inclusion of Substance Use Disorder in the Mental Health Act of 2017 and the constant development of laws and regulations for de-addiction centers, only licensed government-approved institutions are currently operating. Moreover, it has been strictly inspected regularly and frequent visits by the psychiatrist has been made mandatory. It will definitely be a place where you will be able to rejuvenate yourself and come out of this pitfall in a smooth manner. Best choices are made before it's too late. So let's break the stigma and reach experts for help. Small steps taken today will lead to a brighter future tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter, please.
Dr. Nivedika.
Please go ahead, Nivedika.
Good morning. In developing countries like India, alcohol consumption tends to be the major problem due to lack of awareness of its harmful effects. You know what? The shocking fact is, About 33% of all RTA deaths were attributable to drunken driving, and around 62% of all deaths due to liver cirrhosis were attributable to alcohol use. Due to this ongoing alarming situation, the goal of my presentation is to convince you that many recent studies and significant advances in neurosciences have proved that effects of alcohol in the brain results in addiction, which have led to the recognition that alcohol dependence is a chronic brain disorder that has to be treated like any other medical condition, and to encourage de-addiction treatment. What I'm going to do in the next few minutes is to elaborate on how alcohol consumption damages your brain and neurons. Dopamine is considered to be the neurotransmitter for hedonic pleasure. There are many natural ways to trigger your dopamine neurons to release the dopamine, ranging from intellectual accomplishment to enjoying a good symphony. These are called natural highs. Unlike a natural high, a drug-induced reward can start a cascade of neuroadaptation, which translate recurrent reward signals into habitual actions. Repeated reward-associated behavior results in emergence of habits. For example, when a group of friends are consuming alcohol, an area in their brain called ventral tegmental area sends signal to the nucleus accumbens, which release dopamine, and pleasure is felt in their body. These memories are stored in the regions called amygdala. Not merely the presence of friends are necessary but even the recollection of memories can increase craving by sending signals to the nucleus accumbens through amygdala. On long-term use of alcohol, areas in the brain such as dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision making, and orbitofrontal cortex implicated in salience attribution, anterior cingulate cortex in the emotional regulation gets hijacked, and there is loss of control over alcohol intake, but the person who gets addicted may not be aware of it. This is the mechanism behind loss of self-control, which contributes to an individual's inability to resist alcohol intake and engaging in long-term recovery program, and thus increasing his or her vulnerability to addiction. This is why cravings are stronger than willpower. As you're all aware, the economic impact of alcohol consumption plays a major role in families belonging to lower socioeconomic class, and it was found that there was an empirical association between alcohol use and impoverishment through borrowing and selling of assets in distress because of hospitalization. The person in an intoxicated state may indulge in domestic violence with family members, and they teach poor moral values to the child and may exhaust the savings of the family, which can negatively affect the education of children, and the child of alcoholic father will have strained relationship with their family members.
2 minutes.
And affect their psychological well-being. And these are the reasons why people with alcohol use are not afforded the same kind of ongoing care as those with others in other chronic diseases. They are stigmatized, due to which they do not reach out for appropriate treatment. Stigma refers to negative ways in which the general public perceives and reacts to mental illness, including prejudiced attitudes and discriminatory behavior. Now, to redefine our thinking about the treatment, I would like to highlight about the importance of admission, during which experts like psychiatrists help in educating the patient about drug adherence to reduce their craving, motivation for abstinence, explore the consequences of drinking, or expected future course of alcohol-related life problems, and improvements that can be expected with abstinence, lifestyle modifications similar to diabetes and hypertension.
1 more minute. Yeah.
To reconstruct the life without alcohol, and we should remind the patient that short-term relaxes are not an excuse for returning to regular drinking, and it is a process of journey. In process and journey, it can have slips, trial and errors. Slips can be the clues to identify high-risk situation and to develop more appropriate coping techniques. And before I finish, I would like to share my personal experience in my OPD and focus on 3 main reasons why patients are reluctant to get admitted in de-addiction center. First and foremost is that they are worried that they might be physically, emotionally or sexually abused. Secondly, denies disclosing their treatment details, and people think that admission might spoil their reputations. And finally, about being isolated from the society. The good news is that the Mental Health Care Act 2017 lays down various rights of a person with mental illness. When a person seeks help from a licensed alcohol rehab center, they accommodate
Time up.
and
Time up,
through
please.
supervision. Government has stopped abuses, and these centers are now safe havens for those in need of serious treatment. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Next
Dr.
presentation,
Ashley
please.
Shibu.
Dr. Rajshekhar, can you mute in between? There are a lot of vehicle noise in the background.
Okay. So should I mute myself, sir? Okay. Sure, sir.
In between, sir, because whenever you
Okay.
are not speaking,
Oh, okay, okay,
there's
sir.
a lot of
Yeah.
vehicle noise in the background.
So my side, nothing is there. Okay, I will do that, sir. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead. Next presentation, please.
Good afternoon to one and all. Motivating a person with alcohol dependence to get admitted to rehab. Often drinking alcohol is considered to be being vulnerable, but that's not the case. Most people who drink alcohol could be doing it as to reward oneself for handling difficult work deadlines or as a part of one's adaptive function to avoid conflicts. So the effort taken to speak about the problem itself deserves acknowledgement. Recovery from alcohol dependence is a journey, and they have already succeeded in their alpha phase. There are so many things going on from an addiction perspective. Your brain has been constantly adjusted to the presence of alcohol, and this is called neuroadaptation. So when you decide to go cold turkey, that is, stop drinking alcohol one fine day, you undergo what is known as an alcohol deprivation effect. So once the honeymoon period of sobriety wears off, you develop certain withdrawal symptoms like tremors, agitation, more serious symptoms like seizures, confusion, and forgetfulness. So what happens in a rehab? A comprehensive approach addressing the biopsychosocial perspective is addressed. Quelle, what is that? From a biological basis, alcohol increases a chemical called dopamine in your brain, and that gives you the rewarding effect that you experience. So we intend to give you drugs that will prevent the dopamine surge, and this detoxification can also help you to sail through the various withdrawal symptoms. So hence, having two benefits in one shot. Your various emotional concerns, depressive or anxiety features, or sleep disturbances will also be taken care of. We would like to run certain blood tests so that we could look into your liver function and hence get a better picture of the Pandora box that is running within your body. And if at all any medical abnormalities are present, it will be evaluated by the concerned specialty, be it a gastroenterologist or a physician, and hence assuring you the highest level of care. Remember that you are like a seed, where we can water you and give you fertilizers, but ultimately it's up to the seed whether to sprout or whether to wither. Our strategy is not only to instill something in you, but envisions to draw something out from you. So therefore we seek from you as a patient to identify what are the pros and cons of both quitting and continuing alcohol. Of course, alcohol has caused many problems and you have already thought about changing, but still you could not stop because there was something that felt good or something that was helpful with alcohol. So it's time not to break the silence, but to break the ambivalence. Recognizing that you have a problem is important, but the intention to change, that is another level of process. So through various therapies like motivational enhancement, that is MET, we catalyze a change in your behavior from not being aware that you need to change, that is pre-contemplation, through various levels to finally come into an action phase where you need to initiate treatment. We can't change the environment around you, but we can increase your self-efficacy through coping strategies and help you to manage external cues that trigger relapse and make you self-sufficient. And you are not alone in this battle because we are going to explore the various family dynamics and the interpersonal issues so as your entire family can also be involved in helping you to achieve the abstinence. An idle mind is always a devil's workshop. So even after you surf through your addiction, we will help you to explore with alternative, pleasurable activities like exercise or meditation through lifestyle modifications and also with respect to your vocation. Old habits die hard, but even Rome wasn't built in a day. Suggesting change from our comfort zone is overwhelming, and it doesn't connect any of the dots when looking forward. So therefore, resisting change or denial of the problem is the most simplest route any person will traverse. But always remember, discrepancy that stands between where you are currently and where you aim to be is you. The intention to change That's what makes all the difference. And we are there to guide you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presentation, please.
Dr. Infan Birara.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Once I met this patient in my first year residency. He came to me and told, I was consuming alcohol on an occasional basis. In a hurry, I made a diagnosis, alcohol use, occasional pattern. Later, he continued the statement to say, my occasions happens regularly. So later I need to change my diagnosis into alcohol dependence pattern, continuous use. So before moving into motivating a person into alcohol dependence for rehabilitation, I want to establish that he's truly alcohol dependent. That is what I am meaning from this slide. Good afternoon, one and all. I am Dr. Infan Birara, postgraduate student from CMC Vellore. The topic given to this presentation is motivating an alcoholic for rehab. How I am viewing this topic is from the patient's point of view and from doctor's thought process, how is it going to be happening? So the patient might have gone to hundreds to thousands of people. All of them would have told, since you are consuming alcohol, you are going to die. Your liver will get into failure. Your brain will not work. Your organs may dysfunction. So I'm not going to talk the same thing and bore my patient. It has to be addressed, but not at the initial phase. So I'm utterly neglecting the topic at my initial visit. But what I'm going to do is, I want to find out how much alcohol is floating in the patient's brain. That is, I want to assess the motivation level of my patient. For this, I'll ask certain basic questions and I'll look for the answers. If my patient says, born to rum, then it is gone. He's in pre-contemplation stage. If he says, sometimes I drink water just to surprise my liver, it means he's thinking something. So I infer that he's in contemplation stage. If he says, less drinking and more thinking, it means he has moved to the preparation phase. If I see a patient with the saying that, keep calm and stop drinking, he's in action phase. When he says alcohol-free tattoo on him, it means he's fully into abstinence. So based on my initial interview, I'll be ended up with these two things, whether he's good motivated or poorly motivated. When he's truly motivated, my work is very simple there. I'm going to proceed with rehab admission process and nothing much. But for a poorly motivated patient, I need frequent reviews in my OPD and I'll be discussing that next step. For a good motivated person like this, I'll first show him my rehab center. I'll show the room where he is going to stay. I'll show the places, meditation area, the restroom, the playing area, all these places, so that he'll get an idea of what it is going to be. And I'll gradually introduce to the doctors over
2 minutes.
Doctors and co-patients who are getting treated there, so that he will get some idea before getting into admission. Because people will scare a patient that you're going into rehab center, it's a jail. So I want to disprove that it's not going to be that way and it's a way of helping him. At last, if he wants some extra support, I'm not going to place any hard and fast rules. If he needs an extra sofa, I'm happy in providing, because it's a very difficult thing for a demotivated patient to come for help. So I'll provide the facilities to whatever level I could. But for a poorly motivated patient, I'm going to emphasize this fact first. I'm not going to change a bad person into a good person, but my target is changing an unhealthy individual into a healthy individual. So once this sets up in his mind, I'll gradually ask him to come to my OPD on a regular basis. I'll talk on other things rather than focusing on alcohol as such, about the social aspects and occupational aspects. Sure. And I gradually make him to tell the point that he needs help from me for alcohol de-addiction. And that is the point when I'm going to address the alcohol thing. Also, I'll let the choice to come from him. He is free to make his own choice, but he's not free from the consequence of the choices he make. This will also be my focus during the therapy with him. At last, I'll also tell him that the greatest gift which you can give to your family is your abstinence from alcohol and not your abstinence as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Infant.
Dr. D. Sujita.
Next, yeah.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Sujita. I'm a second year postgraduate resident from Christian Medical College, Vellore. My talk would be in a way which I'll be addressing a patient who's coming to my OPD, and it will be in layman terms, and I won't be using any technical terms. Before I begin, can you guess who this actor is? He is actually a very famous Hollywood actor who actually rose to greater heights in his earlier part of his career, and he was even deemed to be one of the greatest promising actor of his generation. But life took a upside down toll in his life. He spiraled to alcohol, drug use, and he was even arrested and imprisoned. But something marvelous happened in his life. What happened to him and who is this? Keep guessing, I'll be revealing in a few minutes. So when it comes to alcohol use, you always know that the recovery to alcohol de-addiction is never easy. The pathway is always harder. A lot of questions arise in your mind. What if I fail? What if I don't succeed? But whenever there is a negative aspect to it, there is always a positive aspect. There is the positive aspect being, what if you succeed in it? There is always a brighter life ahead. But if you don't try at all, the regret that you will hold on for your life and the what ifs you will carry on to your life, that will be always harder than the recovery itself. So once you have decided to take up this de-addiction, you might find yourself floating into a pool of alcohol. Don't worry, that is where I am here to help you to sail you out of this pool of alcohol you've gotten yourself into. So this alcohol is actually a very mischievous thing. Initially you feel that it sort of takes you to a heaven. You feel very joyful, very happy, but it's nothing but a hell which is actually disguised as a heaven. And one drink is never enough. Even 100 is never enough, and even 1,000, it will be never fitting enough. And the most horrible part of it is, it sort of maximizes itself in your life and minimalizes and trivializes the most important relationship and people who add value to your life, thereby neglecting them completely. And this is where you feel that you have sort of gotten yourself into a maze that keeps going on and on and on, and you may not find it easy to come out of it. And when you find yourself, you realize yourself you're stuck in this maze, you'll feel that you hit rock bottom of your life. And when you hit the absolute rock bottom of your life, you'll feel that, oh my God, I have come to the base, I've come to the core. How am I going to get up or get to the surface? But always remember, there are two ways to look at it. You can think that I have actually hit the rock bottom, there is no way of going up. But the famous saying by J.K. Rowling goes, you can use this very solid rock bottom because you know there is nothing beneath it. And that is a core you can reach. You can use it as a solid foundation from which you can build up the castle of your life, which is actually crushed because of this alcohol use. So once you have decided to take up de-addiction, it is not going to be easy. But by this time, your brain, the master, has taken over. The neurobiology behind it, as the saying goes, it sort of makes you to crave for the substance. But your mind knows that you want to get out of it. And that is where the real struggle comes. The struggle between the master and the mind. But you always remember that the soul and your inner conscience is always stronger than the master himself. And that is when you decide that you can take this one single step. All it needs for you is to take this single step, and we are here to guide you to begin a journey of 1,000 miles that will take you ahead. Now with this, I would like to reveal this. This is none other than the Robert Downey Jr., who is a beloved, well-known actor who plays the very famous role of one of the most iconic roles in cinematic history as Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. So he actually got into alcohol addiction. He actually hit the solid rock bottom of his life. But what he did is, in this rock bottom, he built his castle. And he played this role of Iron Man. So I feel he was apt to play this role because he is not a hero in his real life.
1 minute.
He also was a hero in his real life. And I feel all of you have come for de-addiction. You have an inner hero within you who can be invoked, and you can successfully move ahead and be successful in this journey of de-addiction. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. G. Lakshmanan.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Good morning to one and all present here. As a daily routine of psychiatrist, today we are not going to discuss about daydreaming during the interview of patients, but slightly different from it, motivating an alcohol dependent for de-addiction. A man in mid-30s just checked in my de-addiction OPD with two of his friends. At my first sight, he was definitely enlightened under Bodhi, not definitely under Bodhi tree. He came with complaints of sleep disturbances, loss of job, at the verge of divorce. Definitely no one would love to live with an enlightened person, right? As all we know. The patient just was sitting opposite to me with eye contact not maintained, ears open, but for sure it's not for me. And I just made a brief interview with him, and I just handed over a pen and paper to him and asked him to write all the free-flown thoughts, what and all he met with the drinking pattern and problems arose due to the drinking pattern. He started writing slowly with a shaky hands. Once he completed, he handed over the paper to me. I read out the paper aloud. He was keenly observing it. Once I started reading everything, he just started his tears rolling down his eyes. It seems his inner awareness has increased when I read each and every word. That is known as consciousness raising the inner awareness of the patient. Next step, I was partly unsuccessful in emoting out the patient's emotions. Then I showed him various short films. In the short films, the patient realized how it affected the society and his drinking pattern. Next, what happened? Then changing the behavior, how it has helped the family members was realized by my patient. That is known as environmental re-evaluation. Now, I have brought the patient from, after a tough period of, from pre-contemplation to contemplation state, where he himself is in the state of mind whether to continue the de-addiction or again go back to drinking pattern. So I just wanted my patient to re-evaluate himself, so I practiced value clarification exercises, and I asked him to tell about his strengths and weaknesses, just to assess and explore the personal values of the patient, and how the drinking pattern has affected the personal value of the patient was explained to my patient. I felt that my patient was entangled with mixed emotions and feelings, and these emotions and feelings has to be let out. So I just organized some role-play and acting drama among his peers, where he was able to let out and emote out all his feelings and expressions, and that was known as dramatic relief. Now he felt lighthearted. Finally, I just wanted to talk about decisional balance. I just made a decisional balance sheet where the pros and cons of his change in behavior was asked by the patient, and in this contemplation state, both the pros and cons were equally weighed, whereas in the pre-contemplation state, if the decisional balance sheet was maintained, cons would have overweighed the pros. In the maintenance and the preparation phase, the pros would have overweighed the cons in the decisional balance sheet. Next, my patient landed in the preparation stage. When the preparation, next in the preparation state, my patient was motivated to make commitment for this change in behavior, and I told the change is always possible, and I asked him to take resolutions and promises on special occasions like birthday promises and New Year resolutions, and this was known as self-liberation. Next one is social liberation. In the social liberation, I told the whole society is ready to support for his changed behavior and self-efficacy. I assessed my patient's confidence to maintain the abstinence behavior even at high-risk environment, and this self-efficacy is in the high in the preparation, maintenance, and action phase, whereas in the pre-contemplation and the contemplation phase, temptation to have alcohol at high-risk environment is more than the self-efficacy. Definitely, all the psychiatrists should support self-efficacy here. And next, finally, my patient was brought into action stage, where now the foundation is laid. I have to definitely talk about counter conditioning, substituting all the unhealthy behavior and thoughts with healthy behaviors. Whenever my patient met with people and places that reminded him about alcohol, I asked him to recollect all the difficult experience he had with alcohol, like loss of job, marital disharmony, mental and physical problems, and asked him to tell about positive self-statements to get away from the drinking behavior and pattern. Next was helping relationship. I made him to find the relationships who are all ready to help him at difficult situations for his change in behavior, like family members, friends. We therapeutic counselors and therapeutic alliance can be made. I introduced him various self-help groups and social help groups where he can daily routine, evening go and meet them, keep himself motivated and keep others also motivated who are going to have a change in behavior. Next was reinforcement management. I practiced only positive reinforcement management with my patient, just acknowledging the patient in front of the self-help groups by giving some token of appreciation or gift, and appreciating in front of his family members helped him a lot in positive reinforcement management. Finally, I was given as
time up. Yeah.
Stimulus control alone. Stimulus control is re-engineering the environment with behavior, reminders and cues that encourage him for the changed healthy behavior. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next one.
Dr. Drone Bandutia. Is he here? Dr. Drone Bandutia?
Yeah, he's there. Yeah. Please start, Dr. Drone.
Yes, sir. Are my slides visible, sir?
Yeah, you
Hello?
can start, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon to one and all. I, Dr. Drone Bandutia, Junior Resident Department of Psychiatry, Sri Siddhartha Medical College, would be presenting a short presentation on motivating a person with alcohol dependence to get admitted for rehab. Motivation is to make the undesirable behavior desirable. Addiction is a monster. It affects every ethnicity, social class, race, gender, age. It doesn't matter. You can be the most disciplined person in the world, but when it gets you, it has you. It is any behavior that gives you temporary relief, temporary pleasure, but in the long term, it causes harm and some negative consequences which you can't give up despite knowing the negative consequences. Now, to motivate a person with alcohol dependence, we should not see what's wrong with addiction, but we should see what's right with it. What is a person getting from addiction that otherwise he doesn't have? They get relief from pain. They get sense of peace. They get sense of control and calmness. However, very temporarily. Now, why are these qualities missing from their life? We need to know them to find better ways to heal. Now, the question is not the addiction, but why the pain? They are trying to find the emptiness from something outside, from an outside source. So let's aim to resolve this emptiness. How can we transform behavioral change? First, we need to assure that there is an urge or desire to change. Number one, you have to want to change. Motivation comes from within. Number two, act as if. Stop acting like being a moral person. You are not. You are not honest. You are not truthful. You have practiced him being for a long time. Stop acting this. Each one teach one. The way to save your life is by saving someone else's. Success stories are always motivating. Peer accountability is making you accountable for your own action. He and only him can resolve to change. Immediate consequences from bad behavior. We need to know that they need to know that it is time to change. Dr. Keith Humphrey had likely stated that it's remarkable what people believe. What is needed is punishment. However, this whole experience is indeed punishing experience. Do the right thing for a long time. Practice being good. Brickman had developed a two-dimensional structure in which the one dimension was reflecting responsibility for the problem caused, and the other dimension was reflecting the responsibility for the problem solution. The four orientations of helping and coping are the moral, enlightenment, compensatory, and medical.
2 minutes.
In moral orientation, the individuals assume responsibility for both the problems and the solution. Hence, the cause and the solution are viewed as internal. In the spiritual orientation, a person is responsible for cause of his action. That is, it is internal, but not for his solution. That is, it external. In the compensatory orientation, a person is not responsible for cause, but is held responsible for the solution. Here, people are seen as having obstacles that they must overcome and are responsible for their own fate. In the medical orientation, which we usually follow, a person is held responsible for the cause of the problem and also for its solution. Now, we need to promote the positive effects, aspects of alcohol abstinence, that is improved self-efficacy, confidence and esteem, family approval, better health, financial gains, and continued success. However, the negative aspects need to be given more attention to. We need to counteract the frustration, the denial of pleasure, anger on oneself for not doing what he wants. The positive aspects of the alcohol use need to be handled with very care. Needs to be immediate reduction of anxiety. We need to tackle the withdrawal symptoms. Revenge
40
against
minutes,
one's spouse.
40 seconds, sorry.
Better feeling about work and immediate gratifications need to be tackled. We need to help people explore and resolve their ambivalence about their substance use and begin to make positive changes. Hearing on how someone have tackled their hardship from the other, come out from the other side will help gain motivation. Literature says that we as humans have learned brewing before farming. Hence, we really need to are facing a difficult task in taming this monstrous dragon of addiction. Thank you so much. And thank you for making me present. Thank you.
Thank you, Drone. Next presentation, please.
Sir, Dr. Madiha is not presenting, sir. You're now closing the session.
Okay.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah. I thank all the presenters. It was really very passionate and all the participants were very enthusiastic. I hope the judges have already taken the decision. They have given this course. So just brief remarks I would like to give. There were few terms actually, like collaborative versus confrontative. I think that was very good. These are the terms we need to use more frequently when we talk about motivating a person for alcohol treatment. And then one very common thing what I noticed when we motivate is we should try to dissociate the person from the illness. Like rather than saying you are alcoholic or you are addicted, we should say that you are a person with alcohol dependence or alcohol problem. And one particular presenter talked about, I believe the judges, I request judges not to be biased with what I'm saying. I hope that they have already given their decision. Like a particular participant has actually talked about how people take examples of God. If that particular deity is taking alcohol, what's wrong if I take? I think that was a very good way she has depicted. And also I was very much impressed with one presenter where she has talked about marketing psychiatry. I think that's what we should be doing. Marketing not in that bad sense, but how we should, she has drawn upon the principles from MBA, business, and she has put it into the rehab aspect. That was very good. And I was really impressed by one particular statement which was done, which was made by one of the presenter. It was a beautiful statement. I'm now going to use that more frequently in my practice. He said, patient has a chance to choose what he wants to do, whether he wants to remain abstinent or not abstinent, but he does not have any control over the consequences of not taking the choice. I think that was a very good comment. So with these brief remarks, I close the session and I request the organizers to take over. Thank you.
Dr. Rajshekhar, Rajshekhar, with your permission, can I give some feedback? I was one of the judge. Can I give some feedback to the participants before Dr. Pannisalam announces?
Please, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir, please.
Good afternoon. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Really enjoyed this session. I congratulate all of you. I just thought I'll give you some feedback before my colleague announces the result. One is the reason for Blitz is very short, use very limited slides, only 5 slides, and bring your points. So I would say in always slide is not a document. Otherwise you can have a word distributed. So don't put too many words in it. Just have one central theme. And you're anyway going to elaborate. And when you have too many stuff, what happens is people will not be listening, they'll be reading. So that's one. Another thing is it's only 5 slides. That is when you see it in the other mode, you should have only 5. There is one person who used around 9 to 10. I'm not going to name the person, 9 to 10 slides. That is one. Another person, inside each slide had 2 slides. So it's like, instead of, that's unfair because others are going to use only 5. So inside one slide there are 2 and a little later it was 4 slides. So it should be 5 proper. If you are having multiple components in a slide which are related to each other, that is different. They're just components. I'm telling about distinct slides were there in some of the presentations, 4, some of them 2. But if you are all having components which are all connected and it makes a full picture, then it's fine. It shouldn't be too many unrelated slides there. That's another one. Then there should be some connection between the slide and what you're speaking. It can be one central theme and you can speak about it in detail, but it can't be totally different. Then, don't use, again, I'm not going to name person, don't use too many elements just because you have the option to use it in the PowerPoint. Especially video, it's very distracting. Because you're trying to say something whereas some video is going on distracting you. So that actually takes away the viewer's attention. These are some feedbacks I wanted to give. Really enjoyed this session and I enjoyed it. Dr. Panneerselvam, you're going to come and announce? My colleague and we agreed, and as to Rajshekhar as a feedback, we did not get biased. In fact, we enjoyed the talk on religion. I'll tell you the reason about after the results.
We are announcing 2 prizes, one for the postgraduates and another for the consultant. For the postgraduates, the first prize go to Dr. G. Lachmanan. Second prize goes to Dr. P. Sivaraj Sharma, postgraduates. The prizes for the consultant, first prize goes to Dhanashri Akshada, Dr. Dhanashri Akshada. Second prize goes to Dr. D. Deepak Sandaram.
That's it. Back to Dr. Rajshekhar.
Yeah. So thank you very much, sir. I think I really enjoyed being amongst young professionals, postgraduates, as well as the young consultants. It was a very good experience for me. So thank you very much. Now I request the organizers to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Dr. Arun Kumar to deliver the memento to our chairperson, Dr. Rajshekhar Bipeta.